this is the moment many of us have been really waiting for, to have these three absolutely incredible panelists and activists and humanitarians here to share with us their experience and their vision about where we are and how we can push back at this horrible moment when the genocide against Palestinians is expanding. The West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and the war against Iran, the criminal and illegal war against Iran, which is not going to be solved unless we can solve the issue of the rampaging and illegal Israeli government, which is terrorizing much of the world right now, and certainly the Middle East. So all these things are so connected, and as many of us have said all along, as Gaza goes, we all go. And what we allow to happen in Gaza now is going to be with us forever. So this is a really important moment as the economy really explodes with the explosion around the Strait of Hormuz. It's an incredible, it's a teachable moment how the war comes home, how we are all at risk here. This is not a war somewhere else. This is a war against all of us. And it's a very teachable moment because people are hurting right now to start with the military absorbing all that it does. So this is our chance really to engage with people and to really double down on the various, modes of action that we've been taking. And I'm really interested to hear from each of our panelists about how we can further up the ante here to stand up for Palestine and Gaza and Iran, the people of the Middle East, the people of this country, and the people around the world who are all very much at risk and paying the price. But, Gaza and Palestine are subject to the first and the worst. So really appreciate our amazing panelists. And I want to introduce first Ali Abunimah, who is with us here, and you can go ahead and give an applause at this point as well. To Ali, I think, who's familiar to all of us for his incredible work as the founder, director, the voice and face of the electronic Intifida, which has been such a source of wisdom and strength for all of us. And Ali had some health issues that flared up and prevented him from being here, but he's at least able to be with us by Zoom. So we hope to be with him in person at some follow-up event in the not too distant future. And Medea Benjamin, I think, who is all familiar to us, and we can welcome Medea as the face and the spirit of Code Pink, and really the spirit of all of us in the halls of Congress, who's there bird dogging people to try to get them to do what they ought to be doing. Whether they will or not, I don't know, but they need to feel the heat and to pay the price. And many thanks to Medea for her amazing work. And I think she's just come from Ireland, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Medea is, what's that? Plan B. Great. All right. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to learn more about that. And Craig Mokiber, who we are also really honored to have here today, whose distinction, or one of whose distinctions, was to serve as the director of the Office of Human Rights at the UN in New York, but whose even greater distinction was to resign from the office and to quit the office for their failure to actually stand up for human rights. So we look forward to hearing from each of you, and we'll start with Ali, and we'll hear kind of a more focused perspective from the point of view of Gaza and Palestine. And then we'll hear from Craig about how, what's going on and how we can fight this at a more collective international level, and what does international law and human rights have to say about this. And then we'll hear from Medea about how we can bring this fight into our everyday lives and everything that we touch. All right, thank you so much, and a final welcome to the panel.
Good afternoon. Craig, wave if you can hear me. Okay, good. That means I know everyone can hear me. Uh, First, thank you, Jill, and thank you to the Green Party for inviting me and organizing this panel. I had very much wanted to be with you in person and planned to be, but I wasn't able to. I'm doing fine, but I just needed to not move around too much today. But I'm glad I can be with you virtually. And I also want to express my deep admiration for my fellow panelists, Medea Benjamin. I can only endorse everything that Jill said, and Craig Mokiber, who has been one of the rare courageous moral voices throughout this genocide, and who has, from whom I have learned so much these past few years. I want to start in Gaza because whatever else we talk about, we have to keep Gaza front and center. That's what our friends in Gaza tell us every day. You all know that Gaza's health ministry has counted more than 73,000 Palestinians killed by Israel during this genocide since October 7th, 2023. Of course, we know the real number is much higher. Israel has buried thousands of Palestinians under the rubble. It has killed countless more through starvation, disease, untreated injuries, and the deliberate destruction of Gaza's health system. And Israel did not stop killing when politicians started to call the genocide a ceasefire. In fact, they have continued since the ceasefire was announced last October. Israel has killed at least 1,185 Palestinians in Gaza. That's an average of uh, dozens of almost a dozen every day. It still bombs people in their homes and tents. Israeli soldiers still shoot Palestinians near the so-called Yellow Line. Israel is continuing to wipe entire families from the civil registry. In the last week, an Israeli drone struck the Gaza City home of Firas al-Masri, his wife Salsabil, and their four children, Naim, who was 13, Firial, who was 11, Salma, who was 9, and Amira, who was just 6. The attack set their house on fire, and civil defense crews could hear the family screaming and begging to be pulled out. But because Israel has destroyed so much of Gaza's rescue equipment, the crews could not reach them. All 6 were burned alive. The fire charred their bodies so badly, the rescuers struggled to identify them. That is just one incident on one day, but these massacres are still happening daily and they barely make the news. That's what we mean when we say this genocide has never stopped. But there's so much more to it. While exterminating the people, Israel is also stealing what remains of Gaza. Under Donald Trump's ceasefire, the so-called Yellow Line supposedly marks the area that will remain under temporary Israeli military control. But in fact, Israel keeps moving that line westward, and Israel has now expanded its area of direct control in Gaza to almost 70% of the tiny territory. The Israeli army moves concrete blocks hundreds of meters westward, bulldozes the land behind them, and shoots Palestinians who come anywhere near the vaguely demarcated boundary. Israel is methodically bulldozing and dynamiting any homes that are left standing and is cutting off access to agricultural land and squeezing more than 2 million people into an ever smaller space. Still, Palestinians insist on living and surviving, and that's one thing that comes through to me clearly from the conversations we have almost every week on the Electronic Intifada live stream with some of our colleagues and friends in Gaza. If you'd watched this week's live stream, you would have seen Hamad Ashu and the community kitchen he runs, which continues to prepare food for a population that is in desperate need. This week, they made an enormous fruit salad and handed it out to children living in a displacement camp. This is a form of resistance too. Feeding people is resistance. Giving children a moment of happiness in a place Israel has turned into a death camp is resistance. Keeping community and hope alive is resistance. I mention this not to diminish the suffering of people in Gaza or to say that or to romanticize them, but to emphasize that if they are steadfast and resourceful, then we cannot be less steadfast and resourceful and determined than they are. The key point is that all of this suffering is a choice. Israel has deliberately, sadistically, and consciously chosen to inflict this pain, suffering, and death on more than 2 million people. And at every step, the United States has consciously chosen to assist in this genocide. Israel could not do this on its own. And we all know Washington supplies the weapons, the money, the intelligence. The United States protects Israel at the United Nations and threatens every international institution that tries to hold it accountable. I'm sure that Craig will talk about the ongoing and escalating attack on the International Criminal Court, for example. And right now, we're seeing the Democrats speak out about Israel's crimes in perhaps an unprecedented way. Some of it may well be sincere. I think among some Democratic politicians, it undoubtedly is. But how convenient for the party that it is Donald Trump who is now the president, because I do not remember hearing the same outcry from mainstream Democrats when Joe Biden approved, funded, armed, aided, and abetted this genocide to the hilt. Right now, I'm seeing articles that are attempting to rehabilitate the functionaries in the Biden White House, to paint them as hapless and helpless in the face of Israel's crimes. But this is revisionism, and we must not allow it. Joe Biden, Antony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Kamala Harris, and many more made a conscious choice to help Israel kill as many Palestinians as Israel could get away with. Lest we forget, Biden repeatedly bypassed Congress illegally to rush weapons to Israel. His administration vetoed ceasefire resolution after ceasefire resolution at the United Nations, cut funding to UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestine Refugees, dismissed and attacked South Africa's genocide case at the International Court of Justice, and attacked the ICC when it went after Israeli leaders, just as the Trump administration is now doing. Biden saw the shattered bodies of children, the destroyed hospitals, the starving people, and the flattened neighborhoods, and then he told his minions, send Israel more bombs. Every few weeks, Biden administration officials leaked stories claiming that the president was frustrated with Benjamin Netanyahu. They wanted us to believe that the most powerful man in the world could not control the prime minister of a country that is entirely dependent on American support. It was macabre theater. And Kamala Harris, who served in that administration and supported what it did, rejected calls for an arms embargo. She defended Israel's right to continue its military campaign in Gaza, even after its genocidal intent and actions had become obvious and undeniable to everyone. During the election campaign, Palestinian and Arab voters of every background who just had a modicum of human decency, asked for something concrete. Stop sending weapons. Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party refused. The Democratic National Convention would not even allow a Palestinian American to speak from the stage. Democratic leaders even welcomed Republicans onto the stage. They made room for Israeli families of captives in Gaza, but they would not give a few minutes to an American whose family Israel had killed with American weapons. This tells Palestinians exactly where they stood with the Democratic Party. It wanted their votes, but it didn't want to hear what they had to say, and it didn't want to uphold and defend their humanity. Of course, as a result of the Democrats' choices, we now have Donald Trump, and he has taken the same Democratic Party policy and pushed it even further. No one should be surprised by that. But Trump's crimes do not erase the Biden administration's responsibility or Kamala Harris's complicity and role. Democrats do not get to hand the genocide to Trump and then reinvent themselves as the opposition. Now, I also want to point out something that concerns me a great deal, and I've researched a lot, is how atrocity propaganda has helped to fuel this genocide and make it possible. From the very first days after October 7th, Israel, its allies, and the Western media flooded the world with horror stories. You'll remember the 40 beheaded babies, the babies baked in ovens, pregnant women cut open, Palestinians fighters carrying out systematic mass rapes. None of it was true. But millions of people heard those lies. Far fewer have heard any corrections. And it was not just people on the right repeating them, but many Democratic Party leaders and, of course, many in the mainstream media. At the Electronic Intifada, we dug deep into these stories and exposed the ways that atrocity propaganda was used to fuel the killing and justify the killing and deflect from the calls from people all over the country and all over the world to stop the slaughter. I keep coming back to the Democratic Party because for me, we would not be here. They could have stopped this genocide and it would never have continued into the Trump era. But they made the choice to continue, and they promoted these lies every bit as enthusiastically as Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli military. Joe Biden repeated them personally. Kamala Harris brought Sheryl Sandberg's propaganda film, Screams Before Silence, into the White House and gave the mass rapes hoax the official White House seal of approval. So once again, Biden, Harris, Israel, and the media, they turned Palestinians into rapists, baby killers, and inhuman savages so that they could sell the extermination of Palestinian families as Israeli self-defense. Their propaganda gave people permission not to care while Israel starved, dismembered, and burned Palestinian children. This wasn't an innocent mistake in the fog of war. This was a conscious choice and a conscious policy. They manufactured consent for a genocide they armed and funded. Now, this genocide isn't restricted to Gaza. As Francesca Albanese has pointed out, she, of course, is the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories. What Israel is doing in the West Bank is part of the same genocide, even if it is carried out with different methods. The UN has recorded more than 1,330 settler attacks in 250 Palestinian communities just this year. That is more than 6 settler terror attacks every day. Settlers and soldiers have killed at least 18 Palestinians in those settler attacks and injured almost 1,000. Often the settlers carrying out these pogroms are directly assisted by Israeli soldiers, financed by the United States government. So when we talk about settler violence, and I see many politicians increasingly speaking out about it, we should not imagine by any stretch that this is a few isolated extremists. Israel is conducting an organized campaign of terror through the settlers who act as the advance guard of the Israeli army and the state. Settlers attack Palestinian villages, burn homes and mosques, steal and kill livestock and seize land, and the soldiers, funded by the United States, protect them and shoot Palestinians who try to defend themselves. Just a few days ago, Israeli settlers attacked the village of Al-Mughayr near Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. 17-year-old Fadi Hamdallah al-Hassan ran toward the scene after hearing women and girls screaming. Fadi was a member of the Palestinian national football, a youth football team. One of the Israeli attackers shot him in the thigh. Doctors amputated his leg, but they were unable to save him. His mother remembered Fadi as a good student who loved football and who was loved by everyone around him. It's worth mentioning, just in the wake of the World Cup, that the Palestine Football Association, the World Cup, which grotesquely was hosted in the United States should have been the target of a global boycott. But in any case, the Palestinian Football Association says Israel has killed 1,103 Palestinian athletes since October 2023. More than half of them were football players. When Israel kills so many athletes, students, writers, professors, doctors, and journalists, it is clear what the goal is: destroying a society and its future as a whole. That is genocide. Now, I just want to take a couple of minutes to put what is happening in Palestine in a broader context. It's very common in Western media, if you can stomach it, for Israel's attacks on Lebanon and the war against Iran to be discussed as if they are separate issues. But these are all fronts in the same war that the United States and Israel are waging on the region. Israel's goal is clear: to impose itself as the unchallenged military hegemon in the region. It wants the freedom to bomb any country, murder anyone it wants, occupy any land without consequences. That's what Greater Israel means in practice. It's not about drawing lines on a mythical map. Greater Israel is already here in terms of a regional order in which Israel feels it can do whatever it wants because the United States guarantees its impunity. Of course, Israel and the United States label every force that resists this project as terrorism. They bomb and sanction every government that refuses to submit. Iran is in the crosshairs now, as it has been for many decades, because it refuses to accept that order. It has supported Palestinian resistance, while US-backed Arab regimes have normalized relations with Israel, collaborated with it, and abandoned the Palestinian people. Iran has also supported resistance in Lebanon and elsewhere across the region against Israeli occupation and US imperialism. This is Iran's real sin. The US empire simply cannot tolerate a large, powerful country in that region exercising genuine sovereignty and control over its own resources. The United States does not tolerate independence. It wants clients and vassals, governments that buy American weapons, protect American bases, and obey Israel's orders. That's why the United States has imposed crushing sanctions on Iran for decades, just as it has used similar tactics against Cuba, Venezuela, Syria, and other countries that failed to fall into line. It's why it has assassinated Iranian leaders, sabotaged the country's infrastructure, and surrounded the country with military bases before launching all-out war. Israel, of course, is also obsessed with destroying Iran. It wants Iran disarmed, broken apart, and plunged into ethnic ethnic and sectarian warfare, just as the United States and Israel successfully engineered in Syria. Or they want it placed under a compliant dictatorship, a return of the bad old days of the Shah. So the attack on Iran, the ongoing war against Iran, is inseparable from the genocide in Gaza. The United States and Israel want to destroy every state, movement, or people capable of obstructing their plans for the region. They want Palestine isolated and defenseless, Lebanon subdued and torn apart, and Iran reduced to another American dependency, or if not that, then a failed state. But people across the region, across the world, understand that the Palestinians, the Lebanese people, Iranians, and anyone else facing occupation and attack have the right to resist. Western governments send weapons to Ukraine and celebrate its resistance. But when Palestinians or Lebanese resist decades of occupation, siege, colonization, and ethnic cleansing, those same governments condemn them. One thing I can say is that Palestinians do not need lectures on nonviolence from governments supplying Israel with F-35s and 2,000-pound bombs. And people all around the world see this too. It's why Israel has lost so much support around the world. The Pew Research Center recently surveyed people in 36 countries. Majorities in most of them, large majorities, now have a strongly unfavorable view of Israel, and that trend is accelerating. In the United States, 60% of people now view Israel unfavorably. In 2022, that number was just 42%. Only 16% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning voters have a favorable view of Israel. Among Americans under 30, that figure is just 18%. Young Americans now view the Palestinian people and their struggle far more favorably than they view Israel. These are extraordinary sea changes in my lifetime. For decades, Israel successfully presented itself as the victim, the democracy, the brave little country defending itself against unreasoning, wild-eyed terrorists and savages. The genocide in Gaza has destroyed that fake image, even if our politicians still do their best to try to shore it up. But no amount of pinkwashing and greenwashing propaganda or celebrity endorsements can cover up the reality that we've all seen live streamed on our phones for almost 3 years. Israeli soldiers film themselves destroying Palestinian homes and mosques and hospitals, and then putting on the lingerie of Palestinian women they have ethnically cleansed or murdered. Utterly depraved stuff we've all seen. Israelis demonstrate in support of soldiers accused
fucking sound
of horrifying gang rapes of Palestinians.
Oh, God damn it.
Through and through, they demonstrate to block food and medicine getting into Gaza. Israeli politicians openly call for expulsion and extermination and only gain more popularity in the process. With few exceptions, Israel is a genocidal society. Israel's problem, this won't be news to you, is not bad public relations. Israel's problem is not one man, Benjamin Netanyahu, as some Democrats would have us believe. Israel's problem is its nature as a genocidal settler colonial project rooted in European nationalism and racism, whose goal from its very start has been to take all the land of the Palestinians and get rid of the people. As Israel's legitimacy drains away, Israel and its allies are turning up their repression. Across Europe, they ban demonstrations and arrest activists and charge them with speech crimes. Here in the United States, we've seen so-called liberal universities send police to attack student encampments, censor academics, and smear critics as anti-Semites. And of course, the Trump administration is using every lever of repression to attack the Palestine Solidarity Movement and its broader, amid a broader and escalating war on the left. But while governments continue to serve Israel because of entrenched power and money, their publics are moving in the opposite direction. And that gap is where our efforts are making the difference. Here in the United States, our job is to end American support for Israel. That means an arms embargo, sanctions, and boycott. It means defending students, workers, and activists whom universities, employers, and governments punish for speaking out. It means making support for Israel a political liability everywhere, in Congress, in city councils, in unions, in churches, in mosques, where unfortunately you can find it, in synagogues and on campuses. All of us can be united against this genocide, regardless of our background. Over recent months at the Electronic Intifada, we've reported on incredibly successful initiatives, including in Michigan and Illinois, which have resulted in state bodies divesting millions from Israel bonds and weapons manufacturers. Some of these campaigns have gone on quietly behind the scenes, but they have met with enormous success. There are other such campaigns across the country, and they all need our support. This is a moment for us to take the example of people in Gaza, to remain steadfast and strong, to escalate through all the means that are at our disposal, our solidarity and our resistance to this broken and devastating world order, and to replace it with something worthy of the struggles that people have sacrificed so much more. Thank you so much for. Thank you.
I have to say, I've always loved the Green Party until today when you made me speak after Ali Abunimah. Speaking to the mic. All right, I'll do my very best. You let me know if there's any problem with the audio. You know, it's too hot up here for a jacket, so I'm going to take this off. Actually, it's never too hot for a keffiyeh. In fact, the hotter it gets, the more we need to wear our keffiyehs, metaphorically. Well, thank you very, very, very much. And let me say what a tremendous honor it is for me to be here with this assembly of truly extraordinary voices for justice and for the public good. I really don't take for granted these days the courage that it takes at this moment in history in particular, when powerful forces, not least the US government, are systematically attacking all who dare to challenge the empire's lawless tyranny, and all who dare to stand for truth when the truth is criminalized, and for justice when injustice is made the official orthodoxy. Voices like that of Jill Stein and Ali Abunimah and Medea Benjamin, all of whom I have admired for years and from whom I've drawn so much inspiration, and those of the Green Party organizers and candidates and activists who are here today from coast to coast and beyond. Your presence here today, at a moment when dissent and the truth itself are criminalized, is a signal to the world that you will not be co-opted, that you will not be intimidated, and that you will not be silenced. So I'm very grateful to be in conversation with you today. Well, we're meeting at a moment of extraordinary darkness, as has been well outlined by Ali. From Khan Yunis to Beirut, from Tehran to Havana, from the Mediterranean Sea to the Caribbean, and from New York to Los Angeles, there is a cloud descending on humanity. As I speak, a violent axis is rampaging across the globe, committing acts of serial aggression, destruction, and genocide, kidnapping leaders, stealing resources, destroying infrastructure, murdering innocents, and dismantling institutions of law and diplomacy. The two highest crimes in international law, aggression and genocide, perpetrated in broad daylight, day after day, month after month, year after year, over and over again, while the perpetrators boast of their crimes and arrogantly dare us to try to stop them. This is the US-Israel axis, a marriage made in hell, merging the arrogant lawlessness of US imperialism with the violent racism of Israeli Zionism, and the latest technologies of surveillance and murder with seemingly limitless impunity. And mark my words, if we do not confront it and stop it, that hell is coming to the doorstep of each and every one of us. Already today, the world is recoiling in horror as the Israeli regime, armed and funded and protected and accompanied by the US empire, rampages across Western Asia, leaving a trail of blood and destruction from the Mediterranean coast to the Persian Gulf and beyond. As it perpetrates genocide in Palestine, aggression, war crimes, and crimes against humanity in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iran, and beyond. Unlawful occupations in Palestine, Lebanon, in Syria, and assassinations across the region. As it corrupts governments and institutions from across the West, first and foremost here in the United States. As it persecutes human rights defenders wherever they dare to challenge the Israeli regime, its myriad crimes, or the deeply racist and fundamentally violent ideology of Zionism upon which it is constructed. And there is another assault happening as we speak, perpetrated by the US-Israel axis with the complicity of its proxies and its Western sponsors. That is the assault on international law, on international institutions, and on the very idea of human rights. The scope of this assault is unprecedented. In its sights are the rules of humanitarian law, the norms of human rights, the UN's human rights rapporteurs and committees, UNRWA and the humanitarian agencies, the judges and prosecutors of the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, human rights organizations everywhere, and hear this, everyone in this room. We too are in its sights. And just 2 weeks ago, Marco Rubio, in a statement, more cartooned villain, schoolyard bully, or mafia hitman than statesman, announced the intention of the lawless Trump regime to accelerate the attack on the ICC and to dismantle it, quote, brick by brick. A duly constituted international court openly targeted to protect a genocidal regime. This is the sound of open criminality, and it is the sound of impunity. But it is foremost a warning that the beast cannot be appeased. It must be confronted and defeated. Because, as we know, fascism loves so-called law and order, but it despises the rule of law. And because this unprecedented assault on the rule of law should chill the spine of anyone who cares about justice and human rights. So this is a truly extraordinary moment in history, indeed one of existential challenges. But the seeds of this assault are not new. They are at least as old as the Israeli regime itself. The year 1948, which saw the adoption both of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and of the Genocide Convention, together promising a new era in which all human beings were to be born, quote, free and equal in dignity and rights, promising an end to state oppression and colonialism and institutionalized discrimination and genocide. But in that same year of those promises, the horror of the Nakba, and by the way, the beginning of apartheid in South Africa and the creation of the Zionist regime of Israel. That was more than just a historical coincidence. Rather, it was the birth of a virus, the virus of the Israel exception to international law, shepherded in by an unholy alliance between the forces of Western imperialism, white supremacy, European fascism, classical anti-Semitism, ancient Islamophobia, and descendant political Zionism. Together, these forces declared that the lofty promises of the newly printed UN Charter and of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights may apply to some privileged people on this earth selectively, but not to all, and certainly not to the indigenous people of Palestine. They were to be shunted aside, displaced, and erased, all to make way for a new European settler colony called Israel. That one fundamental breach of the stated rules of the new post-war era, that original sin of the nascent United Nations, has haunted us all for almost 80 years. And it has brought us to the era of expanding darkness in which we now find ourselves. It has laid the foundations for a wall of impunity that was continuously buttressed by the US, the UK, Germany, and the broader West for 8 decades, through massacre after massacre, war crime after war crime, ethnic purge after ethnic purge, atrocity after atrocity. Its first victims have been the people of Palestine, still suffering through a century of oppression and imprisonment and torture and murder and displacement and apartheid and genocide. But we know that impunity is a voracious beast. The more you feed it, the hungrier it grows. And so the Zionist regime with full US backing did not stop there. It turned itself on the people of Lebanon, of Syria, of Yemen, of Iraq, and of Iran. It targeted UN workers in Gaza, humanitarian flotillas on the high seas, journalists on their beats, medics in hospitals, and just for sport, children in their schoolyards. And still unsatisfied, its proxies and sponsors and pro-regime harassment cells here in the US and the broader West turn their attacks on our students protesting Israeli apartheid and genocide on college campuses. Students expelled, protesters in cities across the globe oppressed, workers attacked as they organized in their unions, professors fired, workers blacklisted, migrants deported, protesters arrested, politicians smeared, all for opposing the world's first live-streamed genocide. And for its part, the international system established since the Second World War has struggled to respond effectively. Parts of the system have all but collapsed, either in the face of Zionist organized campaigns against them or in trepidatious and shameless deference to the power of perpetrator states like the United States, the United Kingdom, and Germany. Israeli spy agencies, Western governments, Zionist harassment cells acting on behalf of the Israeli regime have all been ruthless in their assaults on the international system. They have intimidated, harassed, and publicly smeared international officials, imposed unlawful state sanctions on the ICC prosecutor and judges, on a range of human rights organizations, on the courageous and principled UN rapporteur, Francesca Albanese. Almost 3 years into the genocide, the UN Secretary General, cowed by Israeli intimidation and bowing to Western power, has failed to even utter the word genocide. And his senior-most political staff, including the Secretary General's own advisors on children in armed conflict, on sexual violence, have all resisted speaking out long into the genocide. And his advisor on the prevention of genocide has been almost entirely silent. Some even became complicit in the crimes of the Israeli regime by non-critically echoing its fabricated genocide propaganda and thereby paving the way for the genocide to continue. The Security Council, blocked by US and UK vetoes, has been entirely useless and wholly discredited by its inaction in the face of this historic crisis of humanity. Brought to its knees by the Axis, it has even gone so far as to pass a resolution entirely unlawful and ultra vires, endorsing Trump's King Leopold-esque colonial land grab, dubbed the most outrageously Orwellian terms, the Board of Peace. Now, let me declare today, beyond any reasonable debate, that the UN Security Council is dead, destroyed by its own hand with the blade of lawlessness and the poison of cowardice. And the UN General Assembly, despite some important initiatives codifying the orders of the ICJ and finding the Israeli occupation entirely unlawful, has itself failed to use all of the powers available to it under the Uniting for Peace mechanism to circumvent the US veto and to isolate the Israeli regime, declare sanctions and an embargo against the regime, to reject its UN credentials, to establish an international criminal tribunal to hold it accountable, or even to reactivate the UN's anti-apartheid mechanisms to address Israeli apartheid. We must demand that it acts urgently to do all of this and more. In the midst of a genocide, in the midst of serial aggression, you do not leave arrows in your quiver. If it does not do so, the UN will not overcome these stains on its record and these fatal blows to its legitimacy. And so it should be. But there is light. Rapporteur Albanese has stood up to the organized campaign against her, despite smears and death threats and official sanctions designed to silence her. In doing so, she has been a light in a moment of extraordinary darkness. So too have the people of UNRWA stood tall, bringing honor to the UN flag, relief to the communities they serve, and hope to those who still believe in humanity. And they have done so despite an organized smear campaign, cuts to their funding by genocide complicit states like the US, the detention and torture of countless UNRWA staff, and the murder of almost 400 of them since October of 2023, many along with their families. There is no precedent for this. And hear this: Israel's wall of impunity is beginning to crack, not because of any saviors from above, from governments or from the UN or anywhere else, but because of you and millions like you standing up around the world to challenge this tyranny. You are helping to isolate the regime, to punish those who are complicit in the public and private sectors. And today, the Israeli regime is on trial for genocide in the International Court of Justice. Its occupation of Palestine has been ruled entirely unlawful by the ICJ. Its leaders are indicted for crimes against humanity. It has been found by international institutions guilty of apartheid, crimes against humanity, and genocide. In the face of tremendous pressure, Special Rapporteur Albanese, the people of UNRWA, the judges of the ICJ, and principled humanitarian and human rights workers have not bowed and have demonstrated the truest principles of the United Nations in their steadfast and courageous example. And while governments sit passively by or march along to the drumbeat of fascism, the people are standing up in our millions, and this movement is growing every day, as it must. There is so much at stake in our struggle against the horrors of imperialism and Zionism. Palestinian lives and dignity, the lives of millions across the broader region, the rights of people across the West, the system of international law carefully built up over 8 decades. I believe we are all duty-bound to act to oppose this. Let them hear our voices in the halls of diplomacy, in the corridors of the UN and in the international tribunals, in our schools and our churches and our mosques and our synagogues, our places of work, in our unions and on our streets, to denormalize the Zionist project and end its horrors, to stand in solidarity with Palestinian steadfastness and resistance, to work for boycott and divestment and sanctions, to seize the media and educate our neighbors, to expose and prosecute perpetrators, to mobilize, demonstrate, and engage in direct action even as they criminalize it, to speak and to act in our communities to end Israeli regime impunity, and to bring redress to the victims of imperialism and the victims of Zionism and freedom for Palestine. And remember, the Palestinian people are the front line of defense of the lives of millions, for the very system of human rights and international law, and ultimately for the rights and freedoms of all of us. We abandon them to our own detriment. Now, some have tried to ignore the drumbeat of fascism as it echoes across Palestine in an orgy of extermination. Some looked away as it thundered over the border into Lebanon and Syria and Yemen and Iraq and Qatar and Iran. And as the Axis extended its unlawful and brutal aggression in Somalia and Nigeria and Venezuela, many simply covered their ears as it moved closer westward into the Mediterranean, where humanitarian ships were targeted one by one. They shrugged when it roared into the Caribbean, where boaters were blown out of the water in a series of extrajudicial executions in broad daylight, a head of state and his wife kidnapped at gunpoint, and an island nation placed under a brutal siege simply for refusing to bow to tyranny. And even today, some look away as the US government, acting on behalf of the Israeli regime, targets people within its own borders, college students and professors and human rights defenders and peace activists and journalists and dissidents and leftists and Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims and Green Party activists. But those who have ignored this bloody fascist crawl across the globe, those who have refused to hear the cries of the Palestinian people or the Lebanese people or the Iranian people, of the Cuban people, those who have ignored its attacks on the UN, on international judges and prosecutors, on Francesca Albanese, and leading Palestinian human rights organizations like Al-Haq and Al-Mazan and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, those who would downplay the mafia-like threats of Marco Rubio to dismantle the ICC, those who think they can retreat into infantile nationalism or dismiss the very importance of international law and international justice altogether, those who refuse to hear the decades-long warnings of brutalized indigenous, Black, and migrant communities here in the US itself, they are having a rude awakening today because the imperial boomerang has come home once again. The danger is here, and the call is coming from inside the house. Many of you will know that the imperial boomerang is a phrase used to describe the reality that colonialism and white supremacy and militarism practiced abroad will ultimately come back home as fascism. It is the idea that governments that use repressive techniques to oppress peoples in colonial territories and across the South will eventually use those same techniques domestically against their own people. An idea that originates with Aimé Césaire, a Black writer and thinker from Martinique, in his 1950 work, Discourse on Colonialism, where it was used to explain the origins of European fascism in the first half of the 20th century. Césaire pointed out that the methods used by Hitler and the Nazis were not unique at all, except that they were used against white people. Because all of those horrific practices and tactics were first used by the West against colonized peoples of the global South, causing millions of deaths across the globe. And the same tactics and technologies and ideologies today used to oppress Palestinians and others are now appearing on our streets, on our campuses, and in our workplaces. The proof of this is all around us today. The repression, the violence, the racist bloodlust, the silencing of dissent, the enthusiastic support of our government and so many of our neighbors for genocide. The masked armed men sent by the government to break down the doors in the middle of the night and gun down our neighbors in the middle of the street. With each successive crime committed by the US empire, the Israeli regime, or their complicit allies, their desire for blood and conquest expands. It has spread across Western Asia and the Caribbean and is now spreading across the United States itself. And with each step, it moves the red lines further and further over the boundaries of human rights and of human decency. We allow it to continue unchecked at our own peril, and let us recognize again, if genocide is not a red line for them, there are no red lines. Look around you. Mass incarceration and privatized prisons across the US overflow with Black and brown bodies under the control of for-profit companies that honed their skills on Palestinian bodies under the Israeli regime, and supervised by prison guards trained by the same Israeli regime. ICE agents and FBI agents and militarized local police enforcement trained by notorious Israeli police agencies, and using the same brutal, racialized, and unlawful tactics on our neighbors for which the Israeli regime has been universally condemned. Decades of the US underwriting of apartheid and surveillance and repression and genocide in Palestine and beyond is now being brought home with the brutal persecution of students and protesters and others opposed to the horrors of the Israeli regime. With distortion of US legislation by Israel and its US government adjacent proxies, and the official adoption of the IHRA definition designed to silence dissent about Israel. The full suspension of the First Amendment of the US Constitution on behalf of the regime, the criminalization of speech that is critical of the regime, the proscribing of BDS despite constitutional guarantees, and especially by the corruption of US law enforcement with a constant flow of Israeli weapons and equipment and surveillance technology and intelligence and training and influence via Israel regime proxies here in the US. Technology notorious for its brutal and abusive use on Palestinians. Militarized tactics that have been universally condemned. Tactics not designed for civilian protection or law enforcement, but for killing and maiming. Israel's so-called counterterrorism tactics, surveillance, brutal crowd control techniques, racial profiling, and intrusive intelligence gathering, mass surveillance and data extraction technology from Israeli companies like Celebrite and Paragon Solutions to access our data. All of that should terrify every person in this country. But the Israeli regime is exporting more than just weapons and technology and tactics through its cooperation with these police agencies. And by the way, for ICE agents and Cop City outside of Atlanta and beyond. But it's also exporting a violent and racist ideology, extremely right-wing, thoroughly Zionist, militarist, anti-human rights, and deeply anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, and anti-Palestinian. An idea that says that the targets of law enforcement are not a population to be served and protected, but that they are the enemy. They are terrorists, not entitled to human rights. These are ideas that resonate deeply and find fertile ground with law enforcement agencies here that were founded as slave catchers and left to terrorize communities of color for centuries. The idea that we must be contained, silenced, crushed. And what people should know is that these training exchanges are often organized by Israel regime proxy organizations right here in the US, including the Anti-Defamation League and GINSA and the AJC and AIPAC, paid for, by the way, with US tax dollars. So already thousands of US law enforcement officials, ICE, Border Patrol, FBI have traveled to Israel since the early 2000s for this indoctrination and have been unleashed on our communities. These are the domestic echoes of our country's exported horrors. The home front reaping of a poisonous crop sowed thousands of miles away and fed with the toxic fertilizer of impunity. What this tells us is that the liberation of Palestine and Lebanon and Syria from Zionist oppression and of Cuba and Venezuela and the broader South from imperialist tyranny are all inextricably linked to the liberation of our own communities here in the US and across the broader West from oppression by the same forces. That we must free our own institutions and societies from racist, imperialist, and Zionist forces and break the trajectory of the imperial boomerang. Because Palestine will not be free until we are free, and we are not free until Palestine is free. Beyond this now familiar slogan, it truly is one struggle. Now, let me close with this. Left to its own devices, the repressive arm of the state pulls in only one direction. And we know that both major political parties in this country are agents of the same oligarchic power structure, with barely distinguishable ideologies of exceptionalism, corporatism, neoliberal economic policy, neoconservative foreign policy, unbridled militarism, imperialism, and Zionism. And both parties, as the Green Party knows all too well, have pledged themselves to serving as the loyal guard dogs of the concentrated power of the billionaire class. The Thiels, the Adelsons, the Ellisons, the Koches, the Bloombergs, the Zuckerbergs, and some, the Epsteinian oligarchs who command their political underlings in the Congress and in the State House and in the White House, to continuously feed Wall Street and the military-industrial complex and the Israeli regime and their own pockets while starving the people, both literally and figuratively, of food, of healthcare, of education, of decent infrastructure and decent jobs, of access to the truth and of justice itself. The precedents of since the 1960s of neoliberal mass deprivation, followed by the race-based mass incarceration of the war on drugs, followed by the systematic abductions and torture and extrajudicial executions of the war on terror, and followed now by the silencing, police beatings and expulsions and firings and arrests, incarcerations and deportations of people simply speaking out against apartheid and genocide of the Israeli regime, all with the complicity of the media corporations, the Wall Street robber barons, the Silicon Valley dystopianists, the Israel lobby, and the war machine. Each of these has represented ever-expanding ripples of repression, and no Congress or president, Republican or Democrat, has worked to reverse these abusive trends. Rather, each has helped to entrench and expand them, either for cash payoffs from their donors or for their own nefarious purposes. As a result, we are now rapidly spiraling down a dangerous vortex of fascism. All official checks on abuse of power have been weakened or entirely dismantled, and there is no force on earth that can stop this decline but us. It won't be easy, the struggle is real, and the obstacles are daunting, but we must try. Because with every passing day, the slumber of the people is exploited by the designs of the oligarchs. And their systematic implementation by a captured and servile ruling class bent only on the consolidation of their own power and wealth. Our job here in the belly of the beast is to awaken a nation that is sleepwalking into fascism. The hour is late and the threat is real. So let me finish where I started with Aimé Césaire, who also taught us, and I quote, "When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty." This is our duty, to rebel, to challenge this repression in every way we can, to stop the slide into barbarism and then to reverse it, to draw a red line against imperialism and fascism and for human rights and equality and for peace. Victory is never guaranteed, but defeat is certain if we do not fight back. Yes, the struggle is hard. The night is dark, but I'm not here with a message of despair today. Because I know something that Trump and Biden and Netanyahu and Smotrich and the fascists and the Zionists and the oligarchs and the corporations and the lobbies don't know. I know that we're going to win. Because they may have the corrupt governments and the surveillance software and the guns and the drones, but we have something more powerful. We have justice on our side and we have the people. We have the people. People like you see here today rising up in record numbers from Buffalo to Minneapolis, from New York to London, from Rafah to Beirut, and from Johannesburg to Sana'a, despite the persecution, the repression, the threats, and the smears. We are here, and we will not be silenced. We will tear down the curtain that they have put up to obscure their historic crimes. We will stand in solidarity with those that they seek to destroy. We will demonstrate and speak out and educate our neighbors and support BDS and prosecutions and direct action and civil disobedience. We will expose their propaganda, vote them out, break their bottom lines. We will shame them and we will work to hold them accountable. We will declare to the world that their crimes are not in our name and that all this must end. So today, in our communities, on our streets, we are saying no more. No more repression here at home. No more persecution of our neighbors based on their migration status, their race or gender or religion or political opinion or sexuality or gender identity. No more war on Iran or Venezuela or Cuba or Yemen or any of our sister brothers elsewhere in the world. No more colonialism or apartheid or genocide in Palestine. No more imperialism abroad. No more fascism at home. Together, we will free our communities, we will stop imperial wars, and we will see a free Palestine in our lifetime. And we will not relent until it is so. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Craig. It was bad enough with Ali Abunimah.
Come on, let's go.
Then I have to go after you.
Just real quick, we have extended into the next panel. So after Medea goes, we will not have time for questions on this panel. Just letting everybody know.
Well, I do find it amazing that we had two of the most brilliant voices in our community to speak and to lay out so clearly what we're facing. When you said it's up to us, Craig, I'm thinking, who is the us? And then, of course, as you speak of this larger us around the globe, we realize that, well, it's so frustrating that a lot of the intimidation that this administration has been imposing on us has had real effects, so much so that right now we're in the middle of this horrendous war in Iran. And raise your hand if you've been to a big demonstration against this war in Iran. Big one? A big one? Like hundreds of thousands of people, a big one? Raise your hand. No, we haven't seen that. And that's the effect of a lot of this fear that people are feeling. So it is a difficult time. Now, when I do travel overseas and have a chance to go to places like the UK and Ireland, I see big demonstrations. They are facing fear as well. In fact, when the UK government banned the group Palestine Action, you've heard about that, and gave these horrific sentences to people who were doing their obligation as citizens to try to shut down Elbit Systems, the Israeli weapons company. They have been given these tremendous jail sentences. But what are the people of the UK done? Not just listen quietly. They've been going out and getting arrested for holding a sign that says, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine action. And hundreds and now thousands of them have been arrested for that, making their government look absolutely ridiculous in the eyes of the world. And that's a great example to us of how to fight back when our government goes after organizations like it is doing here in this country right now. I also think that it is a time to really step up the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, because that is a movement that has been terribly repressed in the United States as well, with dozens of states passing legislations to say that you can't boycott a company. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. This is supposed to be as, quote, American as apple pie. And yet we have been facing oppression just for that. So I say, raise your hand if you've been part of a boycott, divestment, or sanctions movement. Excellent, excellent. And we've got to really step up these boycott, divestment, and sanctions in the universities, the churches, the unions, the pensions, the cities. And there have been successful campaigns. Ali Abunimah mentioned some. There's been some great city ones in Richmond, Virginia, in Hayward, California, in Dearborn, Michigan, elsewhere. But we really have to step those up. And also the campaigns against individual companies. There's been a great campaign by here in the US, the Palestine Youth Movement, together internationally against Maersk Shipping, that has had tremendous success. I mean, in Italy, the dock workers closed down the docks, they closed down the ports. And here in the US, we have Maersk announcing that it will stop transporting goods to and from Israeli settlements. We have a Starbucks right here in this university, just like we see them everywhere, boo. But there has been a tremendous campaign against Starbucks globally, so much so that Starbucks has had to has to close down hundreds of its stores, particularly around Asia, and mentioned actually that it has been affected financially because of this boycott campaign. Another campaign that I have seen and been part of is around Trader Joe's. Raise your hand if you've gone into a Trader Joe's. You might not have one in your city, but some of you are raising your hands. And we got a letter from their legal department saying, you better cease and desist putting those stickers on Trader Joe's products, their Israeli products. And I just came back from Ireland, where they go into the stores. You know, we kind of sneak around and put the stickers on when nobody's watching. They go in with Palestinian flags, marching in there, openly putting on those stickers, and then taking all those products and throwing them up in the front of the stores and saying, you better not put them back on the shelves. And they have managed to get Israeli products out of so many of their stores. So we have to step up ours. And one campaign we want to start with you all is called Israeli Feta Cheese Stinks. And I think that we can go into the stores wherever they're selling them, buy them, open them up, and smell them. And if you think it stinks, go back to the store and say, this smells like apartheid, I want to return it. So we need lots of other creative campaigns. I think both Craig and Ali talked about AI and what these tech companies are doing to give the Israelis and the US the targets, thousands and thousands of targets to kill people. We saw it in Gaza. We're seeing it in Lebanon. We're seeing it in Iran. There are some really great groups that are forming that we all have to be supporting. Some of them are tech workers from places like Google. No Tech for Apartheid is a great group that we need to support. I've been part of a group since 2012 that has been a campaign to stop killer robots. It's in 70 different countries. And we have campaigned since then to say, just like there was a treaty to ban landmines, there needs to be a treaty to stop the autonomous weapons. We also have to use the fact that people all over this country do not want data centers in their communities. And this is something that is nonpartisan. You don't have to be a Democrat or Republican or Green, Independent, or anything else to recognize that these data centers are just plain bad for your community. But what we have to do is really help educate people about how much of those data centers are connected to war. And to say that we don't want AI for war, we need a campaign that brings all kinds of groups together, a unified movement of peace groups, tech groups, academics, unions, whistleblowers, immigrant communities to come together and say, no AI for war. And then I would say amplify the Palestinian voices. I mean, what more beautiful voice did we hear today than Ali Abunimah? And so many of the wonderful Palestinian Americans in our own communities whose voices need to be amplified and unfortunately are often silenced. Like when Ali Abunimah tried to go, where is it, to Switzerland? Switzerland, my goodness. But here in the United States, when we see these wonderful students like Mahmoud Khalil or Mohsen Madawi, who have been arrested and still, even though they're out now, the government is still going after them, just like the longtime Wisconsin resident, Sally Sarsour. We need to do whatever we can to protect the Palestinians and others who have been detained by ICE just for their advocacy for a free Palestine. I want to talk for a minute about Congress because that's unfortunately where I spend the majority of my time, just about every single week going to Congress. And Ali brought up the fact that so many of the members of Congress have been changing their tune and wondered if it was really a reflection of the change of their heart. I think for some of them it actually is, because they have been seeing what's been happening just like us. But for many of them, it's also because of our work. It's the pressure campaigns. And I was just absolutely floored when I saw the vote for Tom Massey's bill to cut $3.3 billion from Israel, to see that the Democratic whip Catherine Clark voted for that, to see that the former speaker, pro-Israel hawk Nancy Pelosi voted for it, to see that the Democratic head of the Armed Services Committee in the House, Adam Smith, voted for it. It's thanks to the work that we all have been doing to put pressure on them, because they are caught in this bind, just like the Republicans are caught in the bind. Of course, their bind is, do they keep on the coattails of Donald Trump, or do they look at the public opinions and see which way the constituents are thinking? And it is quite an indictment of our entire democracy for the rest of the world to see that when the vast majority of Americans now don't want one more cent going to Israel, here we only can get 104 people to vote against sending another 3.3 billion. But is the glass half full? Well, I'd say it's a quarter full. To say that we got 104, to say no, to say we won't send more money to Israel. But that brings me to an issue where we all need to work really hard now. And that is what was called the Section 219, which I hope you have heard of, or in the Senate Section 1217, which is designed to merge the Israeli and US militaries. And if you don't know the background of that, understand how unpopular it is to send US taxpayers money to Israel. That's why we saw 103 members of Congress vote against it. Now, there has been this 10-year memorandum of understanding signed by President Obama that was giving this 3.3, and then really if you add the other $3.8 billion a year to Israel, that's going to be over in 2028. So they have been renegotiating. How will that look? And at first people were saying, well, a 10-year isn't enough. We want to do a 20-year memorandum of understanding. And then they said $3.8 billion a year isn't enough. We want to do $5 billion a year. And then they said, uh-oh, this will never pass through Congress because there's too much public opposition. And so we better find another way. And that's when Netanyahu himself came up with this other way and said, why are we fighting about $3.3 billion or $5 billion when we can get access to hundreds of billions of dollars if we merge these two militaries together? Because we know there's going to be at least $1.15 trillion Pentagon budget. Think of all the money available if we have joint research, if we have joint production of the military facilities as well as the intelligence ones. And so that's why they came up with the 217 amendment. And it just passed in the House, but it hasn't passed in the Senate. And we have time because it appears that the National Defense Authorization Act will not be voted on until after the elections. So we do have time right now. And that means that we have a job to do. Now, it's a terrible a position for Green Party members to be in because we have such contempt for our Congress that people really don't like picking up the phone every day and calling their congressperson. You've said to me in the halls here, I've done that for so long and they don't change. It's really not worth my time. You know what? It is worth your time. Take 5 minutes out of your day every single day and call your member of the Senate, your two members, whether or not you think it's worthless or not, do it and tell them, don't you dare vote for that NDAA. Don't you dare merge the US and Israeli militaries at a time when the American people don't want anything to do with Israel. Don't you dare do this. So we have a job ahead of us. Raise your hand if you'll work on this issue and call your member of Congress regularly. Be a bug in their side. Be a real pain in the arse. As my friends in Ireland say, when they talk about their two parties, they say two cheeks of the same arse. Well, call the two cheeks of the same arse and tell them no. So I just want to end by saying that while we are looking at a Congress and a White House that is sold out to AIPAC and the Christian Zionists, because let's not forget the Christian Zionists, we also have to understand that public opinion does have an impact and that we have won the narrative. And it is so important to keep reminding ourselves, and we see it in the polls and polls and polls and polls. In fact, another one this week, and each poll shows something even greater, that more and more people are saying no more money to Israel. But you know what they're also saying? They're saying we don't want more war. And the Green Party has to hear this because people do not want war in Ukraine. People do not want war in the Middle East. People do not want war in Sudan. They don't want war, period. And they have to look to the Green Party, and the Green Party has to be absolutely, absolutely clear in this, that if they are looking for a place, if they are looking for a party that says no to all war, end all war, and a party that is absolutely clear, unequivocal, that it calls for a free Palestine, that is us. So no more war, free Palestine. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Terrific panel. And we know we're running late and have another terrific panel, but we're just going to give 5 minutes to one of our elected Greens and re-elected Greens, Peter Schwartzman, the mayor of Galesburg, Illinois.
Feel totally out of place. No, it's a major honor. I didn't expect to be doing this. I was sort of told about an hour ago. But I can tell, first I want to welcome you to the state of Illinois. I've been the mayor of Galesburg, Illinois, about 3 hours west of here. You can take the Amtrak straight there. I'll greet you at the gate, and we'll take a picture with Abraham Lincoln together. And then we can go visit the Underground Railroad museum that we have at our college. Anyway, I'll make this brief. And really, I don't need to say anything that hasn't already been said. Frankly, we are the people that we need, right? And we can't look around and expect anybody else to do anything. And I got into politics. My dad is David Schwartzman, so he brought me up in a political environment, right? Washington, D.C., teaching at Howard University. And every day I was with him. He passed in July last year. He taught me that, one, you speak your mind and you fight for justice. And that's what you have to do. That's what life's all about. There's love, but you lead with love. That's what it is. That's what justice is all about. If you see it as love, then go love somebody. I mean, every single day in our lives, we have an opportunity to give love. And guess what? It's free. This idea that we don't have money to fix all the problems in the world, absolute lie. It's the biggest lie out there. We have money to drop bombs, way more than we need, right? We have way too much money. So anybody who says we don't have money for this, for that, it's a lie. They've been sold a lie. Because not only do we have all the money we need, we have all the people we need. We have over 8 billion people on this planet. So we have all the people, we have all the money. Do we have the love? Where is the love? That's what it comes down to. Do we really love each other or not? We know, we heard from all these speakers, there are people out there who are sacrificing their lives every day, struggling to stay alive, trying to feed people, cooking in the most desperate situations. Where are we? That's what it boils down to. It really is. It's as simple as that. And this man here said it last night. It's clear as day. Right? Clear as day. We have to do what we can do. That's it. It's as simple. Okay. And I don't want to. So I ran for office. I became a counselor. Then I ran for mayor. I was outspent 15-1 by the man who owns a radio station that plays Fox News in my community for the last 20 years. And how did I win? Well, I went door to door and I just met people. And that's what we have to do. And I'm an introverted guy. So for me to do that, but I did it for 15 years. And I'll tell you what, I love to do it now. I love to do it because when you meet somebody at their door, that's real. It's not over computer. It's not on the phone. It's you and them. And you're on their space. That's their home. So in some ways, you're an uninvited guest. But if you bring love, you will be received. And no matter what their opinions on anything are. Because we need, and I think that what you said was, what can we provide? Love, for sure, right? It's inexhaustible and it's free. And we all have the capacity. Next thing we have is we know what people need because we ask them what they need. And we can't bring food to people. We can't bring mental health care through love, through appreciation by listening, an ear. We have what we need to survive. We don't need all this other crap. Really don't. So I'm not saying anything hasn't been said. You guys are beautiful. It means a lot for you to be here in the state of Illinois, my home for the last 28 years. And I love you all, and let's keep it going.
Want to shake your hand, man. Oh, everything you said. No, I mean, thank you for the good words as well, and yeah, for fighting the good fight and for your uncompromising moral clarity at all times. I do appreciate it, brother. Jason Paul, still campaign manager. Just a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah, I'm with all of you.